Hey everybody, we're Shayem and Chris, and this is Fan Team Radio. And we are back after the 2024 Chinese Grand Prix in Shanghai. Chris, I feel like we should come up with a boring to exciting meter for races to start up the show. What's up?
Yeah, I mean, back to the Max Verstappen show, right? It's we kind of know what's going to happen, but it was the first sprint weekend of the year, so maybe slightly more to chat about a new format. It's the first time they're sort of doing this individualized sprint race with Park Ferme allowing them to sort of change the cars in between races. Curious what your thoughts are on the format overall. Just did you enjoy it this time around?
I get it makes more cohesive sense putting the sprint qualifying and the sprint race before the actual qualifying and actual race instead of sandwiching it in a arbitrary way. So I guess the format is better, but man, I was making a joke to you earlier about this, but it feels like sprint races to me feel like playing an exhibition game against your buddy in Madden. Is it exciting? Sure, but only in the moment. Because as soon as the game is done, you're just left with the feeling of like not really caring anymore. Like the rest of the day just carries on. You don't really, like Lewis got second place and I still didn't really feel anything. I don't know. I just think that there's still something that's missing from the point of a sprint race. We talked about this at length before about other ways that they could spice this up and make it feel like it actually means something to the sport instead of just a race point five. Like it just doesn't even feel like all the gravity of the situation is there. um Again, it was fun to watch. I think it was a relatively fun sprint weekend, especially with Lewis looking strong, but that was also probably due to like weather impacts and all that stuff. So I don't know, man, I'm still not sold on the sprint concept yet. Do you think it was it better for you? What do you think?
I mean, like because of the rain, like rain is the great equalizer, as they say, which it was. Like it really shook up the pack. I definitely don't mind watching it, but just like you, I feel it has no stakes to it. For instance, when Lewis was leading laps, and I had that moment of hope where Max wouldn't just run him down and make him look like he was standing still. But I was like, even if Lewis wins this race, like I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, finally Lewis wins a race. Like it's not really a race, and there's not a lot of whole
I,
points at
I had the
stake.
same. I had the same. That's interesting. You brought that up. I had the same thought. I was like, even if he did win, would I have really cared? Would I have posted something on like Instagram, like saying like Lewis won a sprint race? Like, yeah, I think Oscar Piastri said it best when he won his sprint race. Right? He was like, I don't really know what to do with this.
Yeah.
So
I was
I
thinking I was
mean,
thinking exactly that. Like everyone was praising Oscar for his win, but everyone like Oscar himself is like, I didn't really get a win. This is more of
I
like
feel like
a
it affected Norris more than it impacted Piastri when he won.
definitely. So yeah, just like I really don't know what to do with this format because they kind of gave me everything that I asked for. I s- to For it to no longer reset the order, for it to be an individualized thing that's separate from the Grand Prix and it doesn't affect it in any way, shape, or form, and it still falls flat. Like I'm gonna watch it because it's F1 and it's on and craziness happens. But once the actual Grand Prix starts and things get going, I just completely forget what happened. I had to actually go back and remind myself what actually happened. And besides Lewis leading a couple laps and Norris like taking that crazy line on the outside in the first thing and then kind of losing it and bending it and going from first to seventh, there was no excitement. It just kind of felt like, all right, what are we doing here? I was kind of actually hoping for the grass to catch fire, so they had to red flag the sprint race and do some more
Yeah, that was
craziness
nuts.
just for some
What the
excitement.
hell is that all about?
Well,
That's what
they
happens when you
painted the
don't use a track
grass,
for 5 years, I guess.
yeah,
It just
or
catches
it's
on
just because
fire.
you race in China and they try to fake everything.
You said that, not me. Honestly, man,
Yeah,
the thing is, like, it's a so Charles Leclerc got what fourth place in the sprint, right? So here's this guy who, for qualifying pace, is like some wonderkin, right? Like but even with the shortened like distance to run, he's still coming up behind like Lewis and Checo, and he's not that far off of Carlos, right? So like, I don't know, man. Maybe it's also exposing. I think because I'm unable to enjoy the sprint race as like a what they're intending it to be. I'm starting to find other ways to kind of look at this, right? The thing that's standing out to me right now is that Charles Leclerc is like one lap speed or whatever that he has. He can't really even extend it to 19 laps, you know? So like, so it's kind of fortifying my reservations about calling him like an outstanding like kind of generational driver. I think it's really putting into perspective that he might not be that, you know, and that's okay. That's all right. You know, I think that you know, there's more than enough appreciation to go around the paddock. I just think my appreciation for Charles has kind of subsided a little bit, especially after watching his performance in the first sprint, especially since he's supposed to be like that short distance kind of workhorse. That's just not kind of, you know, manifesting itself right now from the standing. So yeah, I don't know. They're inching in the right way, right, Chris? But the key word there is inching. They're not like really making great strides into a reason for me to want. So another thing that you mentioned is that you had to go back and rewatch the sprint race, right? I did too, bro. Like within 5 minutes, I shut it back off. I was like, I've seen
Right.
enough, you know. Like I saw like the 10-minute highlight clip. I'm just not excited about it. Like I don't know what it is. I always rewatch the actual race highlights in the full 30 minutes just so I can, you know, kind of pick up on anything I might have missed. But and I'm excited to watch those, right? I can kind of see it through a fresh new lens. It's just not landing with me with sprint races. So even though they're inching forward, I you know, it's just not there for me.
It's also just not consistent. Like it's one of those things that you forget exists because there's kind of so few of them. There's like 5 or 6 throughout the year, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, sprint weekend," and you're like, "Oh yeah, I forgot that that kind of is a thing." And so then you kind of have to re-prep your weekend or figure out how you're going to watch it or what matters, and then you're like, "Let's see how this goes," and it's always not exciting. And then you have a couple more races without it, you forget it exists, and then you have to do it again. So I think they just need to, like we talked about this ad nauseum over the last season, where they just need to figure out their format and like stick to it. That way, there's a consistent viewing experience for the drivers. There's a consistent like understanding of how you're going to race, how you're going to get points, and setting up the car. And I also just think that it's ridiculous to have sprint weekends with a cost cap because more opportunities to crash the car, to have situations, chassis changes, all those kind of things. So
Yeah, I mean, for people that might just be listening in for their first time now and haven't, you know, really listened to our episodes before, the two formats that you and I've talked about, Chris, is either A, making it a place where, you know, reserve drivers can now come in and drive and show off their stuff. So it can get like, you know, how Ollie Behrman showed up, and that was the most exciting part of that race, you know, like so Liam Lawson showing up, like that's super exciting. That like injects a bit of like a reason for people to show up. So that was one of the formats that we suggested, is mandating that maybe one or two reserve drivers need to be at every sprint for every single team, and then that the FIA subsidizes any kind of, you know, collateral damage or damage to the car due to the reserve drivers like kind of being on there for the first or second rounds. You know, having that be taken care of by the FIA just to amplify the kind of excitement factor of that. The second thing that we discussed was doing a reverse grid, which other people have talked about quite often, which I also think would be really exciting, is essentially seeing just purely based. I mean, Max will probably still fucking win that outright, but that second tier of race cars, like that would be so exciting to see. What would Alpine do if they're in the front with Haas and Williams? Like, would they be able to keep their own? Like, you know, so that's another interesting kind of perspective on this, right? It's a very Mario Kart esque kind of thing going on, but anything to make it a little bit more exciting. Like this is just a like scraps, like table scraps, you know, like it doesn't even feel like it's like a part of the full meal, you know. So I
yeah,
don't know. I feel like we've beaten this down to the nub. But any other last trailing thoughts on this, Chris?
I mean, long story short, like I think any of those suggestions would, at least be a start. That would be awesome to see a bunch of reserve drivers, guys who never get their shot in F1, and that would give these team principals time to see somebody like Kimi Antonelli in a race situation in the car. The problem with the reverse grid is you're going to get someone like Lance Stroll on pole, and we know what happens when Lance Stroll is in the mix with other
Oh,
people.
I see the pivot that you're making here, Chris. I like it.
Yeah, because he just he gave us the more exciting part of this race, and thought it was like his bumper cars for a lap or
I mean,
two.
when you're a billionaire, isn't everything bumper cars? Isn't life just one big old bumper car, Chris?
Honestly, like I think that's part of it. I think he just doesn't have as much self awareness because he doesn't need to worry about a spot on the team,
It's
so he
either this
doesn't
or
think of
becoming like a sociopath, you know?
100%. But yeah, no, like literally the probably the dumbest moment I've seen in a lot of Formula One races in a long time. It's just Lance Stroll smashing into the back of Danny Rick because Alonso locks up, which causes Oscar Piastri to have to be careful, which causes Ricardo to have to be careful. And Lance is just looking right to the corner under safety car and
He
smashes
thought he
into
had
Danny
it. He
Rick.
thought he had that hairpin turn, dude. He's gonna just take everyone out and meet Max at the front, dude. You can't say that it wasn't ambitious, man. This motherfucker fucking ran right into the back of Danny Ricciardo, and yeah, he ran Hulk off the track in I think like lap 20 or something like that. I was like, what's this guy doing? He's a wrecking ball, dude.
It's crazy because you know, last year he like breaks both hands. He comes back strong in Bahrain with two broken hands and kind of impresses us. And then he has a couple of really good races and he'll like, you know, keep up with Alonso or play good teammates or whatever. And we're like, Is Lance bad? And then then he has like a shit show of a race, and you're reminded why. And then it just seems to be going really downhill and going right back to Lance that causes crashes in qualifying or just doesn't pay attention.
Yeah, so
I don't.
the incident with Hulkenberg actually didn't even happen. It happened at like lap 4, bro. Like
Yeah,
he didn't even like he started the race off on the wrong foot, you know? Like I don't know. I mean, yeah, he. There's one thing to be said about like competency. Like I think he's a competent driver, and by that I mean that he can turn the car on. He knows how to function it to make it go around the track. And like if you give him like some like decent space, he might be able to do all right. But that's not enough in this day and age of F1, especially when there's so much like talent, like kind of just sitting around essentially, um, uh, there are reports that and I apologize because I don't know what the source was. I didn't get a second look at it, but he's under a more serious kind of scrutiny right now in terms of being asked to leave the team and then maybe get someone like Yuki Tsunoda into that seat, given the fact that they're going to go into their partnership with Honda soon. So that would probably be something that I wouldn't have given much credence in the past couple of months and even last season, just being like what do you always say, like he's the owner's kid, right? Like there's no way.
right.
But we did mention before too, Chris, that there are other stakeholders at Aston Martin. It's not just fully Lawrence Stroll's company, and that he does have a leadership board that he has to answer to, and stakeholders that he needs to show that they're optimizing all of their investments. And Lance just is kind of the weakest link. He's stifling the team's progress. And overall, like I know Alonso signed on a multi-year contract, which is a win for the organization, but I think the steps forward that indicates is only being met by steps back by keeping Lance, in that seat. Um, and I don't know, in the way that he handled the situation, yeah, he just kind of seemed like very laissez-faire about it, like which which doesn't sit right with me. You know how much I hate that shit. But on the flip side, look at Alonso's race. So right off the get go, on the lap one, aggressive first move to try to get that P1, had great traction. Eventually, conceded to Max, but just years of experience, kind of off the line, just showing there. He ended up having the fastest lap of the race. And even in lap 49, did you see that fishtail like on the gravel
Oh my
chasing
god.
chasing Hamilton? And he came. Not only did he recover from that, but he ends up passing Hamilton for P8 right afterward. So
Yeah, like 2 turns later.
Yeah, dude, like my stomach like would have fell out my butt, if something like that. Just watching it, I got my palms were sweaty. So like he was able to do all of this to get his team into points and into decent like points, not just like what Haas was doing, right? But Stroll is the anchor that's holding them down. He's the $1 billion anchor that's holding them down.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw the news that Lance Stroll was going up for contract negotiations soon, I was like, does that guy even have a contract? I figure he just kind of shows up and sits in the seat and goes, like doesn't do any paperwork or negotiation. So when I saw that, I was like, this is a little different, and I wonder if there's actually something really going on behind the scenes, like we've talked about. And to be fair, like, sure, if you like racing cars and you're good at, like you said, he's going to put us both to shame on a racetrack. But maybe now's the time to start thinking about like filling daddy's shoes. Like, maybe learn how to run the team. Maybe learn how to run business. You've had your decade of
I think they have like a
driving, and
hypercar series too, right? That they're invested in. Like, go do that. Go play tennis, bro. Like, go live that life. Like no one's gonna like bat an eye towards you, man. Like, you did not leave that kind of an impact. No one's gonna be like, oh, what a shame. Like, no one's gonna think that about him, dude. Like that's another luxury of being a billionaire. Like once you step away, you're still a fucking billionaire, dude. Like you could go do whatever the hell it is you want.
he's also had some success in the sport, and like he's podiumed and things like that, and he's
Yeah, it's no
had
it's
some
no
good races.
shame. It's just
He's he's not Mazepin or Logan or whatever like that, but you just you've been in the sport a while now, and it's time to probably hang the gloves up. It's just one of those things where you have so many opportunities available to you in life. You can literally do anything you want to do. Like, why be the guy who's, even if you like fast cars, I'm sure you'll have the opportunity to continue racing in fast cars, or daddy will let you take out the F1 car for the weekend or whatever you need to do to get your adrenaline going. But, you know, yeah, Alonso was just kind of putting him to shame. That was actually that moment, that turn one moment was when I really wish the Aston Martin was like on par with the Red Bull, because watching a battle between Alonso and Max would be amazing to watch, just because Alonso doesn't back down. He's aggressive. And then yeah, that snap, we saw what happened with Carlos Sainz when a snap like that happens, when you put a wheel into the gravel. Carlos bend it into the wall during qualifying. And so the fact that Alonso saved that was insane. So yeah, the juxtaposition of Alonso versus Stroll is just night and day. And I think everyone on the team is starting to finally put the pieces together and say, we need a different driver pairing here.
yeah. I mean, outside of the Albon Sargent experiment, this is the biggest gap in parity with driver sets is at Aston Martin right now, and it's like I don't even think it's a debate because everywhere else the coupling are so much closer. But you leave this race, and Fernando finishes P7, Lance finishes P15, and that's because three cars retired, and the only people that was ahead of is Logan Sargent, who we'll talk about later on this episode, and Kevin Magnussen, who popped his tire after hitting after the impact with Yuki. I don't know. I mean, he is our best friend, right? So I want to make sure that everyone knows that we love Lance Stroll and that he's like our guy, dude. Like we hang out whenever we can and hit up the
Big
bars, and I
friends,
want to
big
keep doing
friends.
that with him. I want to keep hanging out with him, but
So I want to make it real with the guy,
yeah, but yeah, I want to keep it 100, dude, and just let him know that he's not doing well, and if anything, that he's probably better off going to another racing series or to another sport altogether.
I fully agree. Yeah, I mean, Lance, come on, Lance, do us a favor. We need some new blood in the sport.
God. All right, let's talk a little bit more positive because I just can't keep going on about the Lance Stroll of it all. I actually want to talk a little bit about. I know we didn't talk about this before, but I actually want to talk a little bit about McLaren.
Okay,
And,
yeah.
and specifically about Lando Norris. I think he had, and me, I'm not the biggest Lando Norris fan, so me kind of coming out with this probably, it should say more than anything. But I think he had a standing race. given the fact that these drivers probably aren't as used to the Chinese Grand Prix track, given the fact that they were offline for 5 years and then it come back on. Like I think it kind of tested the natural talents of drivers more so than maybe other tracks that are really familiar with them. So and what I mean by that is those tracks you can have a track that you're just really good at, right? And by virtue of
Right.
just doing it over and over again, or there's something to it that just kind of calls to your natural talents. This time around, just putting them on like a track that they haven't had a whole lot of exposure to, and just seeing what they can do on just pure kind of on race tactics. You saw what Fernando could do on this track. I think Lando was just the best version of that today, outside of Max, obviously. But yeah, he came in. I think 13-second gap to Max Verstappen, which is still ridiculous, but
After two safety
after
cars.
two safety cars. I mean, but I think it's with all this being said, I still don't think he's close to P1 anytime soon. I don't think this season he's going to get a P1.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible if Max has a DNF situation
I thought you were going to
or an
say Max
issue.
is a death in the family. That's not
Well,
funny, but for some reason that was real funny to me. But
come on, Yost, do us a favor. No, I'm just kidding. No, but yeah, I mean, Lando had a great weekend.
it's
um,
fucked up.
he's, Lando's one of those guys who's got a lot of talent. You probably put him in the bucket of like the guys similar to Charles and stuff like that. There's a lot of talent there. There's a not as much consistency as somebody like Max. Some errors along the way, some mistakes. Lando could have been a race winner twice over now. Had he not made that decision in Sochi, and with the whole Danny Rick swapping cars situation, might have ended a little bit differently. So I think a P1 is in there somewhere against the Red Bulls. Probably never going to happen. I do think he'll eventually get his win, but for now, like you said, he had a great performance. There was a lot of like he basically had a flawless race. Minus the fact that there was Red Bulls on the track. He qualified P4 and finished P2. Obviously, there's some shakeups with the safety cars and pit stops and things like that. But overall, he had a really great race, and I'm excited. I'm excited to see him on the podium more often. But yeah, you're probably not going to see him get his P1 until next year, maybe 2026.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the narrative going into this season, especially after watching the Drive to Survive, kind of the most recent Drive to Survive season, was that Oscar Piastri was going to kind of come in fuming in his sophomore year and just really start taking Lando's cookies and kind of put him on the burner. So he was able to kind of create that distance between himself and Oscar this week, with Oscar finishing P8 and Lando coming in P2. So good job on him to kind of create that gap to get in front of Sergio. I think he got driver of the day, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, just really hats off to Lando Norris for the week today, sorry, for the week. But let's go back to some bad news again. So Mercedes, overall they're just so inconsistent. It's tough to tell if they're steadily making progress forward over this year, or if they're just kind of putting a cap on things, having this be like just a throwaway year, but then also kind of just outwardly saying that they're still developing. I think Toto Wolff has said like in 15 different ways that they're getting a better understanding of the car, which is total bullshit.
He's
Uh,
been saying that 2 years
yeah,
ago.
he's been saying that for a while. So at a certain point, you just got to kind of call him on his bullshit. Toto, love you to death, man, but you just don't say anything at all anymore. Just say like, hey, we're gonna have to debrief and get back to you guys whenever this is a better, when we actually feel the ship is turning. I will say the change from the soft to medium tires helped Hamilton gain 10 positions, but after lap 11, when he pitted for it, he was like, "That's the worst tire, man." Which the optimist in me wants to think that if you were to start off with mediums and maybe go on to hards, that would have probably been a more optimal race strategy for him. But coulda, woulda, shoulda, right? What do you think about Mercedes this week, Chris?
I really wanted them to get their shit together because I really missed Toto versus Christian.
Yeah,
I don't know if you saw it, but Christian said there's been a lot of random rumors about Max Verstappen going to Mercedes ever since the whole drama with Christian, and Toto was out there saying like, of course I'd hire Max if I could and all that kind of stuff. And I think Christian in China said something like, Toto needs to worry about fixing his car, not worrying about Max who's unavailable. And I was like, man, I miss this banter. I miss these guys going at each other all the
and
time.
Christian's not wrong. Like, why would Max leave for a suboptimal team? And I mean, it would have been cool to see, right? But I also knew that there was a highly unlikely chance that that was going to happen. So
Yeah, I mean, it was never going to
yeah,
happen.
that's just, it would have made no sense at all unless like Christian did something so egregious that it impacted the Verstappen family directly. Like I just don't think. Yeah. And then another a little bit of news from the Red Bull side. Helmut Marko went on record to say that Audi's offer to Carlos Sainz is just so much that they can't match it. They're the contract. I guess the contract conversations about Carlos Sainz across the paddock has been kind of surfacing a lot more recently. Mercedes has extended a 1+1 contract to him, so maybe 2 years at Mercedes. That it could be a good fit, but also I think Carlos might be looking for something a little bit more definitive. Whereas Mercedes is probably looking for a stopgap before they can get Kimi Antonelli into seat. There's the Red Bull piece of it, right? They just, I guess, there is a dollar amount that they're not willing to exceed to get Carlos Sainz. And then there's Audi, who I thought they were out of the running, just based on kind of like the bone structure of Steak Sauber, Sauber, whatever. I know you have Ferrari on the docket right now, but what are you making of this Carlos Sainz kind of contractual talks?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where he ends up. I think Audi is a very likely candidate if he wants something long term. I worry about the Valtteri Bottas situation. I mean, we Valtteri chose Sauber over um, or Alfa Romeo over Williams just because he was getting that 3 year contract and it's just amounted to literally nothing. And the team has been nowhere. And I just don't want to see someone of Carlos's talents end up like that. I'd rather see him take a risk at something like Mercedes and see if he can pull it off because, maybe George Russell stops cutting it and he's the one to get the boot for Antonelli. And, it's Antonelli and Signs in the future. We don't know what's going to happen, but I definitely want, like, it would be a shame to see someone with the fire that Carlos has right now and at the peak of his game just be in a midfield car and not being able to compete for wins. So
Man,
I know Mercedes.
Antonelli signs lineup, that would be such a flip of the script after all the resources they put behind George. But that's actually the
I
first
mean,
time I've heard someone say that out loud, Chris.
yeah, I mean, it literally just came to my head where I'm like, hey, maybe George is, again, not everything that we made him out to be. He was this, prodigy. He kind of showed how to take the Williams car above and beyond what it was made to do. And we were all expecting him to come in and sort of started getting wins and maybe contend for WDC. Now, Mercedes has done a lot to give him a shitbox of a car, but he hasn't been just dominating Lewis week after week. There's been some weeks where Lewis is better, some weeks where George is better, and he hasn't really competing for wins. So, and he's binned it on the last lap 3 races in a row. Not in a row, but every race that Carlos has won, George has binned it on the last lap, which is, someone like that's not going to win WDC. So we'll see what happens. You know, I don't know what's. I think the most likely thing is that Checo's going to get re-signed to Red Bull, and it's either between Audi or Mercedes, and it just really depends on the offers and what Carlos wants his longevity to be, and what's more important to him at the time. But I think that's kind of how it'll shake out.
It's funny how quickly tons of offers can be distilled down to two or one realistic offers. So that's just the fun in silly season speculation.
100%. I mean, that's the thing with Formula One is like there's only so many like top tier teams, and those seats are super highly competitive. And the rest, like, listen, I mean, V Carb is kind of like a feeder team to Red Bull, so you just take them out. Like Williams is kind of a feeder team. Kick Saubers and nothing. Alpine is obviously in a
No
shit
man's
show.
land, yeah.
McLaren is locked up. Ferrari is locked up. So it's just like there's only so many places you can go,
Yeah.
and it's difficult.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe that Aston Martin seat isn't too far out of reach if he were to make a reach out to Lawrence Stroll directly.
I mean, I would love that. Like,
He'd look good
look,
in that mint green, that.
and they're also about to get the Honda engines, and
Yeah,
we see what those
I
do in the
think
RBs. Like,
a
obviously,
double Spaniard lineup in Aston Martin, dude. I'd buy some merch. I'd buy that merch,
hey, could you imagine when Spain goes back to Madrid with the double Spanish lineup?
dude.
Oh
I-
man,
I'll,
they go
I'll, I'll
nuts.
buy tickets to that Grand Prix. That's gonna be a handsome Grand
I will
Prix.
absolutely be there too. We'll be there together. We'll do this live.
just
Hell
just
yeah,
just drinking red wine and Coca Cola, bro.
Stroll, make it happen.
God.
Daddy Stroll.
Daddy Stroll, not Baby Stroll. Fuck Baby Stroll. All right, Chris. I know you posted this new proposed point format. Let's you want to walk us through it?
Yeah, just there's it's been out there that there's a new proposed point format that sort of take the points from 10th down to 12th. It's very similar across the board. It just breaks off at 8th and goes from 4 to 5, and then once you hit 5, it goes 4, 3, 2, 1 down to 12th place. Which I'm a huge I'm in favor of this. I want the points to trickle down further. However, I want them to go all the way down. I want points all the way down to 19th with 20th getting 0. Just because I want every overtake to matter. I don't know if you remember this, but on one of the restarts, I think it was Stroll and Sargent. Who was it? I can't remember. But they were battling to the death. And it was like the announcers were laughing because it was like they're fighting for
Tooth
last
and nail,
place.
P16,
Yeah, and it
riveting.
was just like, but it was fun to watch. And could you imagine that this is, if it was actually for point stake and it mattered for the championship season, but at the end of the day, you're like, oh, this doesn't really matter because who cares? They're both going to get 0 points. And I really don't like the fact that you could have these back markers just get 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then you have a crazy Bottas bowling situation like Hungary, and I think 2021, and then someone like Esteban Ocon wins a race, and all of a sudden they get all these points in one race, and that's their whole constructors for the year. I want it to matter every single race. So I know it's the history of Formula One points are rare. Getting points was something special, but in this new era of like heavily televised TV, I think we really need to have points down to the end to sort of make these back markers. Like we're not even getting to watch Max on screen anymore. We spend the whole race watching a bunch of guys who don't matter at the end. So
Yeah,
I want to matter.
I still just don't understand why there's such a huge disparity in the point distribution between first, where you get 25 points, and like even fifth, where you get 10 points. Like I just think like there needs to be a more the incremental gap needs to be a little bit closer. I feel like, and I agree with you. I think like it's hard when you look back on the stat sheet to see like zeros all across the board and to understand at a granular level what that meant, right? When you run back the stats, when everyone just has 0 points all the time, like it's really hard to understand like what impact did that driver have on that season, or even a pairing of drivers, like how do they compare and contrast. It just kind of, yeah, it gets all pulled into this bucket of who the fuck cares, which you probably get the same effect if you have like lower points in lower down the grid, but at least in a historic look back you can kind of see, oh, this is how they comparatively performed to this other team. It's not just all in one bucket, right? I think there is the the granular kind of data collection that is important for, and the historical like tracking that's important for a professional sport to have. I think putting everyone in a lump sum of zero, like this isn't like golf, where you're like, and even in golf, like you go plus, you go into your positives and you can tell like, holy shit, that guy did even worse than zero, so it, it's you kind of need it for more than just like decorum, right? And kind of the the award winners, like, and classifying that, like, that's important for sure. But when you think about like taking snapshots of historical data, especially as F1 becomes more and more kind of popularized and more has a much more Western skew to it now. Like, I think we have MLB records going back to like the fucking like 20s or something like that. Like, dude, like, there are incredibly stupid stats that you can pull for like NFL and NBA. You can like pull stats for like fucking who was the best sixth man that wasn't married in the year 1970. Like, you could pull shit like that. It's
Right.
ridiculous, but like, there you can now depict the trajectory, like a much more clear illustration of the trajectory of a team, based on those kinds of records, as opposed to just being like, oh, they were like a big old dud, like zero. Like, I think I agree. All that to say, I agree with you, Chris. I think that the point should be doled all the way from, I think, all the way to last. Even last place should get zero. And then everything above that should incrementally get a little bit higher, with the spacing in between much closer. So the constructors championship series, like that's actually could be a little bit more viable. So I I'm not opposed to it. I'd be curious to see what the pushback is from certain people to the new point scoring system. But from from where I'm at, where I'm sitting, it seems like it's a logical thing to do. I'm surprised I haven't done it already.
Yeah, I think the pushback is probably just going to be from the historians of the sport who know it one way and have always known it one way, and they don't want the like integrity of the sport to change.
It's the same
But
people that
like
probably push back on DRS and the Halo.
100%, like people just like they know what they know and they don't want it to change. But like you said, this it's a little bit more westernized now. It's more televised, and I don't want Kevin Magnuson to be lumped in the same record book as Logan Sargent with like getting 0 points every race. They're on a completely different level. So I want Logan to have an actual zero in the record book,
Yeah,
and then these other guys to have 5 points there, 6 points there, and it will matter for the constructors championships. And people will be racing their heart out all the way to Abu Dhabi, because every one of those points will matter and be worth millions to these teams. And it'll probably change people's minds when they're retiring the car, um, for maybe a lesser issue that maybe they can keep the car on track. So I think it would make for more exciting races, just straight up. And it's a start to take it down to 12th, but I really think, like we just said, go down to last place, make every point matter, make every place matter, and let's watch some good hard racing.
yeah, I think that's a great pivot actually into our winner circle for me, Chris. So I know I talked a little bit already about Lando Norris, who is top of my winner circle, but I think Nico Hulkenberg is also on my winner circle, and I think exactly to the point that you just made about how there should be a huge discernment between the kind of race that motherfucker put in and everyone behind him, like Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon. Like Nico Hulkenberg qualified P9 this week, and he then finished P10 for a Haas. That's incredible, dude. Like, he got 1 point off that. I think that like he should probably get something like a 5 points off that, and then have the other drivers have less points than him. And that way we can see like the season that Nico Hulkenberg is having is, I would think, way more than what how many points does he have? He has like 3 points this season.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't do him justice for how he's being able to get the most out of this Haas car, especially with Kevin. Like, I know he had that touch up with Yuki, which ended Yuki's race, and then subsequently ended Kevin's race as well. Not ended it, but definitely put him, all the way in the back right before Logan Sargent. But my point is, when you look back on the history books, like when you look back on this season, you won't be like, oh shit, Nico Hulkenberg had, let's say at the end of the season, he has 7, 8 points. Like that's not that impressive. But like
Right.
when you scope into this, last season House didn't have shit, you know, and like now like Nico's essentially like not only crushing it or to the extent that he can at qualifying, which what he was doing last year, but he wasn't able to follow up with it like on the race. He's actually performing at the race too. So I think like this is a great example of why can't points be doled down more generously to people that do come in P10 and then even into the P11s, P12s, P13s, what have you. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that because we're already on that train of thought right there. But I think that's a great reason is just look at Nico Hulkenberg's race in a season so far, right? Um, and since we're kind of already on it, Chris, I'll wrap up on the winner circle on my end. So I have Norris, I have Hulkenberg, Red Bull, right, for all the obvious reasons. But then they also had a huge fuck you when they stopped. When they double stacked, I think they got Verstappen in at a 2.1, and then right after that they got Checo in at a 2.0,
Yep.
and
Insane.
Gasly's pit stop on the same lap, 19 seconds. It's just it's a sport where contrast is just hits you right in the face, and maybe all at once too. So yeah, I think RB did picture perfect job with that, with Checo not being able to finish P2. I don't think it was too much of a mar. I think Lando just did really put in that kind of a race this week. But it's not a whole lot to expand on the RB situation, but I was again really impressed with their pit stop and their pit crew. And then Joe Guan Yu, he didn't score any points. He didn't really do a whole lot, but he finished the race. He finished the race, and he did it in a way that he beat his teammate, and the crowd went nuts every single time that he passed by. It seems like so. I want to give him his and kind of put him in the winner circle, not by any metric of actual success on the grid, but just because it's a feel good story, and I feel good for the guy.
I mean, the guy's a superstar in China. I mean, I think he's big in the fashion world over there now, kind of like on Lewis's realm in that world. And then especially over in China, and then like you said, the crowd was going nuts every time he either made an overtake or came around. Um, and I was actually just kind of impressed with how much spotlight they put onto him for the race. I mean, we don't get anything like that for Logan when we have US races. And it was just nice to see like people supporting someone even though they're not the ultimate star of the sport. So I'm sure he's very successful in his life and great for the guy, but
Again, he's
um,
I think he's also the son of a billionaire. So
they all are. They all are.
you know,
But I'll add on to Hulkenberg real quick because he I one of my really good friends, longtime girlfriends, watched F1 for the first time, and she picked Hulkenberg as the hottest guy on the track. So extra win for Hulkenberg.
I mean, yeah, he's right up there with me with Carlos Sainz, man. If Carlos goes to Audi and then Hulkenberg goes to Audi, I might just buy myself an Audi.
Might get a little RS7, get
Yeah,
it out there, or
2020 model, so I'm not paying the premium, but
you're going to be paying the premium either way.
yeah, either way.
Actually, you'll be paying the maintenance premium.
Yeah, and with them on the team, those resale values on the old Audis might go up as well.
Actually, we might want to buy one today just so we can make a
Just
profit
in,
too.
just in anticipation of the most handsome lineup in F1 history.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, how about all these winners? Let's talk about some losers. So, VCarb had a really awful weekend. It's just hard to, you know, the first time Danny Rick gets his new chassis and he starts actually putting a little of extra performance in. Maybe it's just because he's been to China before. Maybe because the chassis was actually better and the car performed better. I don't know, but either way, Lance Stroll decided to change that, destroy his new car. And then Yuki got punted by Magnussen, and ultimately they just had a terrible weekend, and they're making no inroads. And yeah, just I kind of feel bad for the team, and kind of Danny gets his opportunity to shine, and that gets ripped away from him.
I
So
mean, honestly, with all the movement going around, they might be in a bad position to lose Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda. Like I don't think they're gonna let it get to that point. But they're definitely not treating their drivers in a way that, or giving them the love that indicates that they'd want them to stay in that seat, right? V carb is kind of like a mixing pot, it seems like, whereas all the attention is going to Max, and then maybe a subset of that is going to Checo, and then really not a whole lot is going into, at least outwardly, it doesn't seem like it, because you now have the possibility of Yuki going to Aston Martin. They're not looking at him seriously for that Red Bull spot. Liam Lawson, I think, has already made comments, or there have been reportings of him being discontent with where he's at right now, and potentially going to another seat. I think that VCarb needs to find a more definitive way forward. And I already talked about my loss of faith in Danny Ricciardo, despite the fact that he might, have had a glimmer of something. I think it might be a little bit too little too late at this point, especially, you want to be at that point where, irregardless of a one-off accident every week, you still feel confident that you're in fighting shape. You don't want to be in a place where on healthy weeks you're underperforming, and then when something bad happens, you're hanging your hat on that, right? Like, as the excuse as to why you're not performing. Like, that's the last thing you want. You want to be able to be, you need to be able to account for the fact that these kind of things happen, and perform at such a high octane, on the healthy weekends, that this shit doesn't, throw you off. But now we're in a position where it might not be his fault, but back to my point about 0 points, that's all
yeah,
we're going to see.
yeah,
We're going to see a DNF. We're not going to see anything else. So yeah, bad week for V Carb. Sucks for Yuki. I think he was actually putting together a pretty decent race. Might have gotten P9 or P8, something like that. So yeah, tough race for them. I see your favorite drivers also on your loser circle this week.
yeah. Just I feel so bad every week. Every time I'm like, forget, because he's never getting screen time. He's just, something that's happening. He's getting a 30-second pit stop, and then this race his engine dies. I mean, I remember those days at Alfa Romeo too. Even when Fred Vasseur was the TP there, they're constantly retiring the car. Engine problems, brake problems, transmission problems, gearbox, and it's just like, can this guy finish a race? Like, it might be his last year in F1. So I don't. I
Yeah,
just
that was a tough one to see, because the power unit just died, and so he had to gravel it. It took the stewards like fucking 4 or 5 laps to get that thing out of there, and
yeah, they didn't even
they
call the
didn't even call
VSC.
VC like until like so much later, and he's just standing there like in the middle of a track with like cars going at full speed around the track. That's maybe the sports also forgot about Valtteri Bottas.
That's a sad day, but yeah, even the announcers was just like,
Is someone
"This
gonna?
is obvious.
Yeah.
There's a guy fucking standing there." Could you imagine you'd be the guy who's like still trying to race, and you just go off the track and kill Valtteri Bottas?
Shit. That's a
You have to
sad. That's a sad day.
a lot of naked calendars to fundraise for the funeral. But
Yeah.
no, I just feel bad for the guy, and I I just want, kick Sauber out of the sport. That's a little pun
I
there
see what
for
you did there.
you.
Thanks for explaining.
Yeah. You got someone else on your losers? I think
Yeah,
another
well, I got
Williams
one of my,
driver.
my favorite guys, Mr. Alex Albon. Yeah, I put him in my loser circle this week. He's just been having a tough year, man. I don't know what is contributing to that, quite honestly. I'm gonna blame Logan Sargent for Alex's pitfalls as well, because it's just easy and I need a scapegoat. But
I
yeah,
hear you.
Alex qualified P14 this week. Ended up the race at P12, just outside the points. He had Esteban Ocon. He sandwiches in between Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly, which isn't the best place to be at considering how poorly Alpine has been performing. But yeah, I mean, I'd like to say that Logan's like, if Logan is anchoring, Williams down, Alex is at least contributing with some drag, some fluid drag right there. So I'd like to see him turn it around. I think, given the fact that Logan is in such a bad place with the team right now, that it might they might just ignore it and focus on the actual tumor on the team. And I just think that I think Alex is the kind of guy that's propelled when. Obviously, I think he self propels himself. I think he's really good at doing that. But I think when necessity hits him, he's gonna need to be even more like clutch, and I think that can happen when you introduce a, a competitive driver in that seat with alongside him. I think that was what's going to propel him to stay sharp and not have these lulls, because I think that's what we're seeing right now is Alex is just like in a lull. So I'm gonna put him in my losers bracket this week. I hope that's not something that's normalized going forward. But yeah, I just was not so impressed with this week.
Yeah, who you got in your hot seat then?
And my hot seat is the S boys, Logan Sargent and Lance Strolls.
Yeah, they both deserve it and have been there for quite some time now.
Yeah, I mean Lance Stroll. We already talked about him. I don't want to give him any more kind of
Well,
airtime, but
the only thing I'll add to Stroll is that while it looks like maybe the Aston Martin organization is coming down on him, it seems like after what happened on track, the drivers are starting to organize against him as well. I mean, Oscar Piastri had some words publicly about him saying, because he said something about he slammed his brake down. He's like, yeah, we all have to brake. Like it's like you have to pay attention. And then Danny Rick got really pissed off and said, "Fuck that guy."
yeah, if you're
And
pissing Danny off that much, like you obviously have done something egregious.
yeah, so there's been quite a few drivers who seem to be, adding to the fire to maybe push him out of the sport a little bit, and potentially rightfully so. I mean,
It's fun. It's
they
funny
have
that it was Fernando's lockup that caused that entire thing to happen. I wonder what Fernando would say. I think he just kept quiet. He's like, Mr. Stroll is the best dad on the grid. I'm gonna let them figure it out, and I'm gonna go be on Taylor Swift's new album. Uh,
do you remember 2 years ago when Fernando was it 2 years ago? Or was it last year? I think it was 2 years ago. That was Fernando's first year at Aston Martin. And do you remember like every race he was like, tell Lance like to come
yeah,
on,
like
but
tell
we'll win it
Lance, like
together.
we can go
And
have some lunch after this race, and
yeah,
tell him to
and he was like,
like that life is good, and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I don't hear that shit anymore. By the way, it
No,
just
he's just like, man, fuck this shit, dude. Like,
it's like, you had your opportunity and you squandered it. I'm gonna go ahead and win this race without you.
yeah, man. I mean, I'd just be really curious to see what Fernando would have to say on this situation. But yeah, Lance Stroll, he's in my hot seat. Logan Sargent in my hot seat. I don't think Logan's going to make it past this season. I think the only thing that's keeping him in this season is the fact that Mercedes can't seem to make up their mind about what they want to do with Antonelli. And I think for that, it's the whole domino effect, right? In order for them to decisively, you know, decisively make a decision, so redundant, but make a decision on Kimi Antonelli joining Mercedes is going to be hinging on the fact that they get Carlos Sainz into that seat for a stopgap. And then if they do, then they could probably have Kimi go into the Williams seat for at least a year or two, figure it out there, and then maybe give Albon that surge in competitiveness that he needs, and then maybe make that move to Mercedes. So a lot of moving pieces that, and again, this is just me speculating, right, based on just hearing other pundits kind of talk about it, but that seems to be kind of where the crux of the issue is right now, is where Carlos is going to go. So Logan, I think, is going to stay on just by virtue of that right now. I think once those dominoes start to fall, his seat will get more and more hot. I think he's kind of checked out already. I think he's just trying to kind of save face at this point and not say a whole lot publicly. But you know when time's up, right? And I think Jake
I
Val
mean,
is making less of an effort to go to his defense.
I just part of me is like, have some guts and do it now. I mean, we already know, and Logan knows, and James knows, and Toto knows that this is not Logan Sargent's. He's not going to do anything for the rest of this year to all of a sudden magically change it. We already talked about he got last place behind guys who had damage to their car and had more issues than he did. He still got dead last. The writing's on the wall. It's over. So why not just get him out of the seat now? Put Antonelli in there and get some time with Antonelli in an F1 car, and that'll help have Toto make his decision come, the summer break.
Yeah,
Like,
but like I said, that's if they did that and then Carlos signs it all of a sudden like I don't want to be at Mercedes, then they have to do this thing, this do-si-do, where they're like, oh shit, sorry, like we actually meant to bring Kimi Antonelli to Mercedes while the ink still hasn't dried on his on his Williams contract. That would I don't think James Vowles would play ball. I think because they do have. I mean, even though they are kind of a works team under the Mercedes, powertrain and all that, I do think there's a sense of autonomy there that James Vowles is not going to be willing to relinquish if that situation were to arise. He's going to be like, no, like I have my driver in seat. We wanted to keep him here. So like, I think Toto's been doing this for so long that
right.
who are we to say? But I think Toto probably has foresight into that as well. You definitely don't want a situation like Oscar, right, where if Alpine, I think, fumbled shit on their end and gave Oscar the window of time to rethink and pivot. You don't want that to happen here, right? With Kimi Antonelli, you want to put him decisively in positions that's gonna allow him to succeed. So I think for that reason alone, they're gonna probably wait and keep Sargent in this seat, unless like I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's like a wild card, like Mick Schumacher comes in at a certain point and kind of fills that role. Like that's something that could happen. Who are some other reserve drivers? Frederick Vesti is the other person that they have on Williams. I'm sorry, on a Mercedes docket that could potentially go in. But I just don't see. I think people like him and Giovinazzi and Dragovic, like these guys are probably just gonna be lifelong reserve drivers without. Which is a shame to say, right? They probably have a lot of
Yeah.
talent in the tank, but yeah, I just don't see another person coming in and being able to help them until Carlos says or does something.
It's so sad when you bring that up, just knowing that Logan Sargent has had 2 years in F1 when you have, Dragovich and Lawson and all these guys just waiting in the wings.
Yeah,
It's just,
I mean,
it's a pity.
another ballsy move that could happen in that case is let's say Carlos decides to go sign with Audi and not Mercedes. Mercedes or Mercedes is like, all right, let's put Kimi into the Williams seat. Then there's Liam, who's just out there, and I know he's kind of committed himself to the RB family, but you could potentially, I mean, nothing's set in stone until it's set in stone. So you can potentially go around the block, but then that brings up the contention between Liam Lawson and Kimi Antonelli, in terms of kind of being in the same grouping of new drivers, and you don't want that friction to happen. So eh, it's all up in the air, right? All these balls are up in the air until they finally fall. So I'm curious to see what happens there. But yeah, hot seat for me is Logan Sargent and Lance Stroll. Who's in your hot seat?
I have the Shanghai circuit
Mm,
and in tandem the FIA just because it's been 5 years since we've been here and I've never actually watched a race, on TV live as it happened on this track. I was actually excited for it. I was excited for it's a different track. It's got some unique turns. Turn one is a monster turn. A lot of variation and skill needed for a lot of these high speed and low speed turns, and they didn't re-tarmac the track, and they went ahead and just painted it and didn't tell anybody. They didn't tell the FIA, they didn't tell anybody. So they basically painted the surface to make it look shiny and brand new and
made,
didn't
made in
actually
China,
repave
bro.
it.
Made in China.
And like we were I was watching the race and even in the sprint race, and I was like, is it raining? Because I see a dry line coming through, and it's just the tires ripping up the paint and taking the paint off, creating what looks like a dry line. And so, I wish that they had, you know, went all out and repaved repaved the track, and they even painted the grass with flammable paint, which is why the grass lit on fire twice and nobody could figure it out.
Everyone was like, "Hey man, the Earth is on fire! Like, what's going on here?"
Yeah, and I get it. Like, you want it to look nice and everything like that. I didn't think it looked that great, but I was just excited for it. And I wish it added a little bit of excitement because we saw cars like sliding around a lot all weekend. But that's because the track hadn't been repaved in 5+ years. So they're just. I think the FIA should have done a little bit better job of like sending somebody out there, making sure the track was in good condition for the race. But it is what it is, and hopefully in future years they'll take that to heart and re-tarmac it or whatever they need to do. But I just don't like when you have the pinnacle of any kind of sport and they like let little things like that slide. But ultimately, it's fine. But I just want them to do a better job next year.
Man, just going back to Logan Sargent real quick. This motherfucker, bro. So like this dude fucking dude. So okay, I had to relook at this again while you were talking. Sorry, Chris. So this
You're
motherfucker
good.
finished P17 dead last, considering that Danny, Yuki, and Valtteri all retired. This is who he finished after. He finished after Kevin Magnussen, who had a pop tire, and he finished behind Lance Stroll, who had the rear end incident. He finished behind Pierre Gasly, who had a 19-second pit stop. What the hell? That's all I got to say about that, man. So,
I can't remember if it happened, if any of that happened after the other safety car, which bunches it up. But either way, he's going to be ahead of those guys, and he's just easy pickings for anybody to pass. Like he didn't even finish behind them. He finished behind them by 7 something seconds.
like, where was he? I'm gonna go rewatch this whole race and get just be on board with Logan Sargent the entire just the masochist in me needs to see what happened during his race. Like he just is he like
like maybe there's some sort of possibility that James approached him and say, if you bend the car one more time, you're dead. Like, you're done. Like, you're out. And so maybe he's just driving scared because, he had a couple of incidents and cost Williams, a lot of money and a chassis. And maybe he's just like under the gun and can't, or he just sucks. I don't know. But he's literally nowhere land. He's basically Mazepin or Gotifi at this point.
I mean I'm definitely gonna unfollow him on Instagram. That's for sure. All
Yeah,
right, so
another strong threat coming in from Shayem.
you know how I do. All right, so we got a break off this week, and then we're gonna be back for Miami on the weekend of the 3rd. Should be a fun race. Who you got in your top 3?
I'm just happy that we're going from 3 a.m. race times to 3 p.m. race times. That's all I'm happy about. But
It's a
like,
deal
listen,
break.
with the way Max and Checo have been performing, they're I would say it's pretty much a lock in that it's going to be another 1-2, or I think they're at least going to both be on the podium. And then I'm going to go ahead and just throw Carlos back on there. It was kind of a shame to see Carlos not fighting for a podium or potential win this week. I don't know if it was Ferrari strategy, if the car just didn't like the track, or they were just kind of off altogether on their setup or whatnot. But I think I still believe in the kind of spirit that Carlos has been putting in. So, and I think he'll do a good job in Miami. So we're gonna go Max, Checo, Carlos.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna put the other Spaniard on there. I'm gonna put Max, Checo, Fernando. I think he carries this momentum into Miami. Miami seems like a more straight line speed heavy kind of track as opposed to China. There's not as many hairpin turns, so I feel like Fernando, those lockup incidences that he had, which kind of slowed him down a little bit on this race, I think he's going to be able to really put the pedal to the metal. Hopefully get a P3. Hopefully get on podium. Hopefully give the Miami crowd something to cheer about.
It's another sprint weekend too, which is kind of odd. I didn't know they would do back to back sprint like that, but it'll be at least interesting. But we'll see if the format shapes up to be any better that week, or if we'll reaffirm our yawn and shake up the format in the future. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Cool. Well, until then, Chris, it's been a pleasure, man.
Yeah, always a pleasure. And yeah, sucks we have a week off, but see you in two.
See you in 2. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening. Shayem and I would love for you to join the Fan Team Radio community. So please like, subscribe, or follow on your platform of choice, and we'll see you next time.